Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're going to get started here in just a second. We're going to let everyone sign on and have people enter before we dive in. While we're waiting, if you want to drop into the chat where you're from, yep, Pete's on it. If you want to let us know where you're from, we love to know where people are joining from. Wow. A lot of places and a lot of people. It's very exciting. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks again for joining us. My name is Stephanie Porto. I am Programs Operations Manager with Whole Kids Foundation, and I'm joined by Pete Kearns, our lead grant reviewer on our Garden Grant Program. And this is the 2022 Garden Grant Application Process webinar. So just a few pieces of information, housekeeping items before we dive in. You can always find information about our Garden Grant Program and much of what I'm going to share today at our website at wholekidsfoundation.org, or you can send your questions to grants@wholekidsfoundation.org as well if things come up after the webinar or you need clarification. As we go through the webinar, utilize the Q&A function to submit your questions. We have the chat going and we love that y'all are communicating through the chat, but Pete is going to be managing the questions and working to answer as many as he can during the webinar via the Q&A portion. So at the bottom of your Zoom, there should be a icon where you can access the Q&A function. We will be recording this webinar. It will be available on our website as well as via email if you signed up. If you signed up and you have to leave early, or if you know somebody who signed up and couldn't attend, they will get an email as well with the recording for the webinar. And then additionally, we will be holding a second webinar on March 7th. It's a Monday at 2 p.m. Central, and we will cover some of the same content, but the intention behind that webinar is to provide additional time for Q&A. So we will have a little bit of time at the end of this webinar where Pete helps to field some of the questions he's commonly seeing being asked through the Q&A function, but that second webinar will be dedicated to live Q&A. So come with your questions to that webinar if you need clarification or didn't get what you needed from this webinar. The agenda for today. I'm going to give you a quick overview of Whole Kids Foundation for anyone who's not already familiar and share a little bit about our other grant programs. We'll talk about the eligibility and requirements of the Garden Grant Program. We'll talk about the grant timeline, just a highlight of the key dates to keep in mind. I will share some resources that could be helpful to you as you complete your Garden Grant application. And then we'll talk about the online grant management system where the application has to be submitted. So it'll be more of a technical part of the webinar, but still very helpful. And then we'll leave some time for questions at the end. So the mission of Whole Kids Foundation is that we work to improve children's nutrition by supporting schools and organizations and inspiring families. And the way that we do this is through our various grant programs. So the Garden Grant Program and the Bee Grant Program, and then as well as our school food support programs, such as our Salad Bar Grant Program or some of our larger grant programs, Get Schools Cooking. All of this information is available on our website. And then we also have a 2-hour free health and wellness digital version of our Healthy Staff program, specifically geared toward teachers, available on the ICN website. So that's the Institute of Child Nutrition, and can be accessed from our website as well. So a really great resource. It's accredited for continuing ed for teachers. And then to share a little bit more about our Bee Grant. So sharing more detail about the Bee Grant specifically, because it's such a good complement to our Garden Grant. In the past, we ran them at the same time, and while that's changed, we still find that they make great supplements, and that a lot of schools interested in one of the grant programs is also interested in the other. So we do our Bee Grant program in partnership with the Bee Cause Project. They're based out of Charleston, South Carolina, It is a grant valued at $2,000, but you have the choice of choosing either a $1,500 monetary grant or a choice of equipment, specifically the hive, and then some supplemental educational materials come with both. So for any school out there that has or is interested in hosting live bees, this is a great grant opportunity. So for our garden grant program, why do we have a garden grant program? The goal of school gardens is to connect kids to their food in order to empower them to increase their consumption of fruits and vegetables and really make them excited about it. There is a ton of research out there that shows that school gardens and engaging kids in school garden work is effective. It's effective in increasing their nutrition knowledge, their willingness to try fruits and vegetables, their preference for fruits and vegetables, all of which are behaviors that predict increased intake, as well as, there's a newer study that has recently come out that speaks to also the, more of the social, emotional, and less nutrition-related benefits of engaging kids in school gardens. So these are some specific statistics. I won't read them all, but it's just to go ahead and show that there is a ton of work being done out there to prove and promote the benefits of school gardens. So since 2012, Whole Kids Foundation has invested $15.5 million in supporting over 7,000 schools and organizations with their school gardens, reaching almost over 4.6 million children. So who do we support with our garden grant program? So our garden grant is available to schools and organizations across the U.S. and Canada. So in all parts of the U.S. and Canada, that's all 50 states, Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, and then all the provinces and territories in Canada. We provide support to all areas within the different parts of the U.S. and Canada. So not just urban or not just suburban or rural. We want to reach garden work in all areas. Each year, we usually receive between 900 and 1,100 applications. Last year, we received a record-breaking 1,400 applications. So school gardens and educational gardens are alive and well across the country. The grant is a $3,000 monetary grant. But beyond that, we have very flexible spending guidelines and few requirements. The idea is that you really tell us your plan. We want to know what your specific garden is hoping to achieve and what your plan is, and we evaluate the garden application as a whole. So what we're looking for when we review the garden grant. So there's a handful of key elements. The first one is child involvement and connection to healthy eating. So we're really looking at all of the ways that the garden program is engaging the students or the children that they serve. So, are the youth engaged in every aspect from the planning to the planting to the maintaining, the harvesting, anything that's done with the produce afterwards? Not only are they guided by the adults that are running the program, but how engaged with they is the program youth driven. The other thing we're looking for is when the garden is being used as a way to connect kids to their food. So a connection to healthy eating, really engaging kids and understanding where food comes from, not just in the traditional nutrition education sense, but really understanding that food comes from the ground, that part of connecting with it and getting excited about growing it. The other things we are looking for are integration into academics and school or overall community. So this will look different if you're a school applying versus if you're a nonprofit applying, but what we're looking for here is just how integrated into the community of your organization is the garden and the culture around the garden, and then also how frequently or how embedded is it into your curriculum if you're a school or into your programming if you're an organization. So an easy way to illustrate this is if you are a school, how many subjects are able to engage the kids in the garden to teach the lesson plans? Is it math and science and art? You know, how many subjects can you really incorporate the garden and the garden education into the curriculum? The next thing we look for, the other big piece, is the administrative buy-in. So this support from your leadership within your school or organization. So does your principal know about and support the garden program? Are they behind it? If you're a nonprofit, does your executive director or other leadership within your organization support the garden, and are they involved in the garden? Do they want to see the garden succeed? And then sustainability. So we're really looking at a number of things when we're trying to gauge the sustainability or the longevity of the program. So leadership support or administrative buy-in would be one of those things. We know that edible educational gardens that have buy-in from their administration are more successful over time. So we're really trying to get a sense of all of the components that play a factor in your garden. Will they lead to the long-term success of your garden program? So the use of the funds. Our garden grant can be used to support both brand new and pre-existing gardens. So any type of garden, as long as you're growing kids with food. So we know that gardens come in all shapes and sizes. Some of our applicants are brand new gardens and they're just hoping to achieve that startup phase of their garden. And then we have garden grant applications that are looking for support for their larger garden programs that have been around for 5 or more years. And all of them are okay, as long as you are meeting our other eligibility criteria, which are that you're serving K through 12 kids and you're engaging them in growing food. The funds can be used for scholarship or toward fees to attend a training, but only up to 30% of the total amount can be used for this. So if you have a garden educator at your school or organization and they're interested in attending a training related to school garden work, then you could use $900 of the $3,000 towards the cost of the registration. And then the only things that the funds cannot be used on are real estate, travel funds, and field trips. So it looks like I may have been dropped from the webinar. I'm working to get my screen back up. Pete, if you can hear, if you're still connected.
Yes, I can hear.
If you wouldn't mind continuing or just answering questions maybe as they come in, and I'm gonna try and restart my Zoom.
Yes. So one of the questions we are getting a lot of is how many grants do we award each year, each cycle? And typically we award around 500 grants per year. And then we also have a like kind of an on hold list of as Whole Kids Foundation is able to secure more funding after the grant cycle is over, we are able to fund some of those on hold grants. So typically about 500. Another question that we are getting a lot of is our school or organization eligible to reapply for the grant? And you are eligible to reapply for the grant if you did not receive or were not awarded the grant in the previous cycle. So if you were awarded a Whole Kids Foundation grant in 2021, then you are not eligible to reapply for this year's grant. But if you were not awarded a grant in 2021, then you are eligible to apply or reapply. And we are getting many questions about how a community partner is what is an eligible community partner for the grant, and we will actually answer that live in the webinar. We'll talk a little bit about that. What we're basically looking for is we're looking for an organization or a business that is outside of your school or nonprofit organization, that is an outside partner that is working with you in your educational garden. And what we're trying to, what we don't want folks is just to, claim their community partner as like another part of their school or another part of their organization. We're looking for an additional partner to making your educational garden program great. And I do see a couple questions. Does the PTA or PTO of my school count as a community partner? And no, we do not count the PTO or PTA as a community partner because they are also a part of the school organization. So we're looking for another entity that is outside of the school. All right, it looks like Stephanie is back. And
wow, y'all, I'm so sorry. Can you hear me, Pete?
I can.
Okay, let me these things just kind of happen in the world that we live in these days. So let me get my PowerPoint back up and running. Thank you so much, Pete, for fielding some questions while I was working to get my internet to cooperate. And I promise we'll get through all of the content. We will do our best to get everyone's questions answered and for me to share everything I had planned to share with you all. Okay, can we see this, Pete? Are we good?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, just fingers crossed that doesn't happen again.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so last thing I remember saying was that the funds just can't be used for real estate, travel funds, and field trips. Other than that, the garden plan is yours to tell us. We want to know how the funds can support your garden and where your garden is at. So some requirements of the grant. There aren't many. Some have to do with the funds. There is no deadline by which you must spend all $3,000. We just ask that you start spending the funds within 1 year of receiving them. We also ask for a progress report about 1 year from when you receive your grant, and that will be your opportunity to give us those updates and let us know how have the funds been spent, how much is left, what successes and what challenges have you had. And it is common that we see that the progress reports and what people share with us after the fact does deviate a little bit from what they originally outlined in their plan. And that's okay, so long as the funds are still going to support the same edible educational garden for which the grant was applied, then it's all good. We don't ask that you share receipts for any of the expenses, but the grant agreement does require that you keep those receipts for your own records for a handful of years after receiving the grant. So eligibility, really basic, high level. There are going to be a lot of different situations and scenarios. So if you are uncertain about your specific situation, then please email us at grants@wholekidsfoundation.org. We see a lot of emails where we're just helping to clarify and support schools with understanding their eligibility and how they'll register in the system. So the grant is available to schools that serve any grades K through 12. It doesn't have to be the full K through 12. So long as you serve any grades in that range, you're eligible. You have to be a public school or a registered nonprofit private school, and the tribally controlled and Bureau of Indian Education schools are also eligible to apply. The gardens that you are applying for the grant to support must be on school grounds. If they're not, they typically need to be within like a 5-minute walk from the school. We just find that for the school for the garden to be fully integrated and embedded in the culture of the school, that the most success is when the garden lives on school grounds or is a very short walk to it. And then we ask that you're growing edible food, fruits and vegetables in that garden. If you are a nonprofit applying, you must be a registered 501c3 in the US, a registered charity in Canada, tribally controlled entities that support Native and Indigenous youth, and then government entities are also eligible to apply. And then if a nonprofit's applying, we ask that you serve at least 10 children in the K through 12 grade range regularly. So if you have a really small program, we're just asking, and wanting to see that you are engaging, more than just a handful of kids here and there. And then to the eligibility criteria of growing edible food. So if you have received a garden grant from Whole Kids Foundation in the past, you are eligible to reapply for a second grant. The process is the same. The application is the same. You'll go through the same steps. And the criteria to apply again is just that you have not received your previous garden grant in the last year. So, in other words, we want you to wait one cycle before submitting a secondary application. So this year, as the 2022, if you received a garden grant in 2021, you wouldn't be eligible to apply this year. But if you received your grant in 2020 or earlier, you are eligible so long as you completed your progress report. So if you haven't already completed your progress report, you can do that and then submit an application. We just want to hear from you. We want to have an update on the previous grant before you apply for a secondary grant. So fiscal sponsor, we get a lot of questions about the fiscal sponsor. It is not a requirement of the grant. It's simply something we include so that we have the information that we need should you have a model where you work with a fiscal sponsor, excuse me. We can only give funds to nonprofit entities. So, meeting the eligibility criteria that I outlined for schools and organizations, nonprofit entities. So if you have a fiscal sponsor, they must be a nonprofit as well. It is not required, but an example that I'll use is if you're a school, but that if you got this grant, they have to go, the funds have to go to your district, then you might include a fiscal sponsor where you're applying as the school, the grant is for that particular school, but if awarded, we will issue the check to the district. So there are a lot of models where this becomes relevant and a lot of different situations and scenarios. So if you're uncertain, please email us. We're happy to help you figure that out and make sure that we have all of the right information in the system. If you do include a fiscal sponsor, then that information will also be used as the grantee in your application. And I'll show you what that looks like later on in the webinar. And then somebody from the fiscal sponsor entity will be the one responsible for signing the grant agreement should you include a fiscal sponsor. And that entity, that organization will be the one that receives the check on behalf of the garden. So a little bit about the application. The grant application is meant to be more than just a grant application. It really can serve as a great resource for developing and growing your school garden program. So, think of it kind of as a roadmap. It was built to highlight and, ask the questions about what have been identified as some of the key components of a successful school garden. So, as you're working through the application, if you haven't thought of or, fully developed certain components that it's asking about, that's okay. And the intention is that the application is serving as your application, but it's also serving to ask those questions and to help look ahead at, opportunities for your garden program going forward. For newer gardens, we also find too that, if this is the first garden grant application and you're just starting your garden, it can help you to create that plan as you're going through and trying to answer the questions. It can kind of serve as an outline of things that you could dig into and work on towards supporting your garden. So some of the requirements for the application, things that you'll be asked to provide as part of the process. The first one is a letter of support from your leadership or from your administration. And this goes back to that piece I spoke about earlier related to administrative buy-in. Does your principal or the leadership, the executive director at your nonprofit know about and support this garden? Are they engaged? Are they willing to help? So we ask that you submit a letter on school or organization letterhead confirming their support from them, signed from them. The community partner, which I'll talk about in a couple of slides, different than the fiscal sponsor or grantee. And I know Pete touched on it and started to get at that information when my internet broke down. So we'll share some more detail about that. And then photos of your garden plan, photos or garden plan. So photos of your existing garden or the space where you might be building your garden. And then if you're a brand new garden, a garden layout or diagram. So why do we ask for a letter of support? As I mentioned before, we have learned that programs that have administrative buy-in are more successful. It speaks to their long-term sustainability, their ability to go on over time. If a teacher were to be the champion of the garden and they left, is that principal at the school interested in keeping the garden? Will there be somebody there to help support it? The letter of support must be on school or organization letterhead, must be signed by the principal or ED, and should just generally tell us from that person at your school that they are supportive of the garden. We don't have a template that you have to use. It's just, and it doesn't have to be very long either. We're just looking to see that person or people at your school or organization are engaged in the garden and willing to put their support behind it for the application. So the community partners. We have found that programs that have support from organizations external to their own, support from their extended community are more successful. So we ask that you have an external entity in your community that's willing to give that support. It can be a nonprofit or for-profit business. The support that they provide can be a number of different things. It can be in-kind donations. It can be monetary support. It could be gardening advice or consultation or volunteer support. There's no one right answer for this and a lot of different scenarios. Some examples of community partners might be, if you're a school or even a nonprofit, another local nonprofit in your organization that supports school garden work, or garden education work. It could be a garden store in your community. It could be a master gardener in your community, another for-profit business that has shown an interest in supporting with money or donations of some kind. If you have a fiscal sponsor, in many circumstances, they can also serve as your community partner, with the exception of if you're engaging the PTO or the PTA of your school. And that's just because we don't see the PTA or PTO as being external to your school community. So we would want to see another entity outside of your school serving as your community partner. So we will also ask for photos. The purpose of the photos is to help our reviewers envision your plan. So they will download and look at every photo that you submit to your application. If you are an existing garden, you might include pictures of what the garden looks like currently and maybe the space that you're hoping to expand into or the space that you're hoping to grow your garden to. If you're a new garden, you might include a space, a picture of the space, the empty green space or, parking lot or anything where you plan on putting that garden, and then also a layout or diagram. We ask that you include no more than 3 photos, 5 megabytes or smaller, and then in one of the following formats, PNG, JPEG, or GIF. The photos do not need to include children. They're really intended to be about the garden space and how and where you're going to build the garden. If you do include photos with children in them, be sure to only include photos of children for whom you have photo release. So I included a couple of examples here. You can see these are just basic pictures of the space where these applicants plan to put their garden. And then these are examples of what we might see as a layout or a diagram. And both of these work. You can tell one was made on a computer and one was made by hand, and they both convey the same thing to us. So we're really just trying to get a sense of, you know, what will your garden look like when the plan has been put into place. So key dates. The application will close on March 11th. That's a Friday at 5 p.m. Central. If you have sent us a question and we haven't gotten back to you in time, do not fret. We will work with you, even if it's a little bit past the deadline, to get your application submitted. The review process will be March through June. We work with a team of reviewers who are all across the country, who currently work or have worked in school garden or farm to school work. And so they serve as our subject matter experts, and they will spend the spring and early part of the summer reviewing the applications. We will do the selection process from June to August, and our notification date, regardless of decision, will be August 1st of this year. So everyone who applies, whether they're selected to receive a grant or not, will get an email on August 1st. And then the month of August is spent communicating, getting updates, and the ask is that you formally accept your grant by signing a grant agreement by the end of August, and the packages for the garden grants will be sent out and received during the month of September. So as I mentioned before, we typically get 900 to 1,100 applications. Every year we get many more qualified applications than we're able to fund from the beginning. So we do keep an on-hold list, and it serves as a place that we can return to should the opportunity to fund additional gardens come up throughout the course of the year. We will pull from our on-hold list. If we do not have the ability to fund additional gardens through the course of the year, we will send an email to you prior to the next cycle opening, inviting you to reapply. And if you were placed on hold, we highly encourage you to resubmit. You can't use the exact same application. You have to open a new one, but you can use much of the same content and just make edits, you know, as you see fit. Your garden plan may have changed over the course of the year. Additionally, our reviewers will provide feedback on your application, and so that becomes a really helpful tool in updating your application. So a couple of resources, all available on our website that can support in the grant application process. There is a copy of our application available on our website. It's a PDF version, and while the application must be submitted online in our grant portal, the PDF version can be super helpful in preparing. It'll give you a sense of every question that's going to be asked of you. It'll give you the ability to maybe work offline on your application, gathering information you might need from other people or places within your organization or school, and then only coming to the portal when you're really ready and perhaps have all of that information. We have an FAQs document, which really touches on a lot of the stuff we're talking about on this webinar, but a good reference to always go back to. We have a document of grant writing tips that was developed in partnership with Food Corps, and it doesn't so much tell you what to put in the grant application as much as it tells you how to communicate some of the content you want to share in your grant application. We have a garden curriculum geared towards K through 5 age range, developed in partnership with the American Heart Association, available for free, full download on our website. We have a school garden resource center that is just chock full of a ton of different things, everything from, you know, websites that may have other grant opportunities available related to school garden work, or other curriculum resources or platforms you can connect on and use to connect with other school garden educators. We have a host of success stories of past recipients that may give you, you know, ideas or serve as inspiration as you're working on your garden plan. And then we have a kids club, which is full of activities, garden related, nutrition related, cooking related. You can search and sort by topic. So a lot of good things to use and engage the youth that you work with. We have a toolkit available for free on our website. The Garden to Cafeteria Toolkit was developed in partnership with Slow Food USA and is a step-by-step kit to help schools safely serve garden produce in their cafeteria. So everyone's going to have, their own specific rules and regulations, but the idea is that the toolkit can help you think through and develop those so that you could use the produce you harvest in your garden, in your cafeteria. And then it also provides some example documents for certain school districts that we partnered with. So in the last 10 or 12 minutes before we open it up for questions, I'm going to share a little bit about the technical aspect of our grant program. The online portal where your grant application must be submitted is called Smart Simple. You can link to it from our website or from here, wholekidsfoundation.smartsimple.com. This is what the login page should look like. If you are a returning applicant, you will just use the email that you previously registered for the system. You'll use that email. If you need support with your password, if you don't remember it, or maybe somebody else, you're logging in from somebody else that did this in the past, you can use the forgot password function, or you can email grants at Whole Kids Foundation to get support with your password, and we can very easily update it for you and get you in the system. If you are a new applicant, you will use the Register Here button to set up an account for yourself and your school or your organization. The first thing you'll do is fill out a profile questionnaire telling us simply what type of entity are you. Are you in the US or Canada, and are you a school or a nonprofit? And then furthermore, if you answer school, it will have you designate public or private. Based on how you answer, you will be taken to a registration page that will ask you a series of questions, but also just want you to provide basic location detail for your school or organization. So you'll see here the organization name, address, city, state, zip. It'll ask you about total enrollment, number of kids engaged in programming, your mission. But the key difference here will be based on what type of entity you are and identifying either a specific number that serves as sort of a unique identifier for us. So it's the way that we verify the type of entity that you are and your status as a nonprofit. So if you are a U.S. school, you will be taken to this school profile page. It will ask you to search this NCES database button here, which is just linking out. You can put in information about your school in order to identify the NCES number that will be required to apply. If I could give some advice on how you search, the best tip or trick I can offer is to be creative and liberal in your search. So if you have a real unique school name, so the example I use here is Zilker. It's a pretty unique word, right? So you could just search with the word Zilker and that's probably going to be the most likely way that you'll get search results. If you type in a full name, address, city, state, exactly the way that you're used to typing it, if it doesn't match exactly what's in the system, it will return as though there were no results. And so you may have trouble finding your organization. So the best thing I can say is to be more liberal. Try not putting in every line. If you have a really unique word in your school or organization name, you could try with just that. If you don't have a really unique word in your school or organization name, say you're with Jefferson Elementary, you might try just Jefferson and specify the state and or the city, and you'll be able to tell which one is you based on the address that populates. So that'll be the best way for you to ensure search results, especially if you're searching as a U.S. school. Once you find your organization, it will auto-populate some of the information, but keep in mind that not all of the fields will auto-populate, and so you will want to take a close eye and look. For example, you can see here that most of this has auto-populated, but the state didn't auto-populate. So just take a look as you're going through here and make sure that all of the fields are completed as you scroll through. Similarly, if you're a US-based nonprofit, the process is much the same, but you are searching a different database. So you're just going to be searching for your EIN. You may know your EIN. If you do, you could use that to search. The rest of the page is similar info, location data, you know, ED, primary contact info for your organization, as well as your own info, number of kids you engage in programming. So again, when you're searching through this database, if you are a US nonprofit, then similarly, just be liberal with your search terms. Try using a word or two from your organization name with maybe just city or state versus everything exact. Because if it doesn't match exact, it may tell you that there are no results. For Canadian schools and organizations. For Canadian registered charities, you're going to be searching a similar database, but different. You're looking for your CRA number. And again, liberal in your search terms. Play around with it. If you don't find it the first time, try, you know, maybe just less words or less location-specific data. If you are a school in Canada, your CRA number will belong to your district. Each school does not have its own CRA number. So when you're searching, you will be searching for your district, and it will populate just the CRA number and enable you to edit the rest of the fields specific to your school. If you have trouble with any of this, most of the support we provide during the window has to do with getting people set up in the system. So please don't hesitate to email us. I have a handful of really great interns that are on the ready to support to help you get in there so you can begin your application. You will know that you've successfully registered your school or organization and created an account for yourself when you see this confirmation page. If you don't see this, then you may need to try the process again, or make sure that all of your fields are complete. It will tell you that you did it, and it will let you know that a username and password will be emailed to you. If you don't get that username and temporary password in a reasonable amount of time, like the same day, then email us and we'll get that information for you. There are instances, especially with certain schools and government entities, where the firewalls are so strict that the emails don't come in. So happy to support. It takes us no time at all. So just shoot us a note. We'll get you a login and a password so you can get in there. So again, to synthesize some of the tips and tricks of working within the system, being liberal in your search terms, don't try and type in everything exact or you might not get any results. Always look to make sure that the state dropdown is selected, or that you have selected it, so that the county dropdown will then populate so you can select. Using Chrome as your browser is probably your best bet. It works with Safari and some of the other browsers, but we find that the performance is the best when you're working in Chrome. Read the directions on each page carefully, and then contact us if you get stuck. grants@wholekidsfoundation.org. So the applicant portal, once you do get in, some key things to know about it. You'll have a home page. You will have the ability to see who you're logged in as. So if you're somebody that's applying on behalf of multiple schools or organizations, this will become important to you. That's how you'll know if you're able to open an application for a specific school or organization. And if you do work on behalf of or with multiple schools or organizations and you registered multiple of them, then you'll want to toggle, you can toggle between them using this building icon in the top right hand. Once you've selected the one that you want to work within, then you can utilize the other stuff. Like you could change your you change your password for you, but there will be an organization profile as well where you could edit the information. And then when you get ready to open your application, you'll see on the left-hand side in the panel under Grant Application, the Apply Now button. And once you've opened your application, it will live here in this My Application section. And depending on what stage of the process you're in, it will either be in draft or submitted or finalized. And then you'll also be able to change your password from within and then update any of your personal information or the organization's information. So the fiscal sponsor we talked about before, you will have to register them in the system as well. This is so that we can verify they too are a nonprofit entity. If you're working with a fiscal sponsor, it's just because we can only issue funds to nonprofits. So the process will be much the same. You just won't have to provide as much information, and then you'll provide information related to the fiscal sponsor contact. That will be somebody within your fiscal sponsor entity that can serve as the primary contact. The grantee information, it's in the application, and you'll fill it out no matter whether or not you have a fiscal sponsor. So it's just telling us who's going to sign the grant agreement and who are we issuing the grant check to, what entity. So the breakdown here is, if you have a fiscal sponsor, you're going to use the fiscal sponsor information for the grantee section. If you're using a fiscal sponsor, we will want to issue the funds to the fiscal sponsor. If you don't have a fiscal sponsor that you're working with, you're just going to use your same applying entity's information for the grantee. So extended community support. This is sort of an extension of and a little bit different from the community partner in that it is meant to give an idea of what relationships have you developed in your community outside of your school or organization? Are there other for-profit or nonprofit businesses or organizations that you engage in your garden program that are supporting you in some way? So we don't ask for as many details about it. We just want to get a sense of what relationships exist, what relationships have you developed or are hoping to develop going forward with your garden. The budget section is a section we get a lot of questions about. It's 3 parts. So the first part of the budget section in the application will ask you for your annual garden expenses. So it wants you to share a bigger picture look at the expenses of your garden program for an entire year. Getting a sense of what you anticipate to be the total cost of supporting your garden, for the next 12 months or so. The second section is specific to the grant funds of the Whole Kids Foundation grant. So how will you use this $3,000 grant if awarded? It may be the same as or just a portion of your annual garden expense budget. And then the third section is your projected garden revenue. So how will you fund your garden over time? We know that the $3,000 is enough funds to maybe start your garden or to support part of your garden or a specific period of time for your garden, but it won't support your garden over the long term. So this is your opportunity to share with us other ways that you may be bringing in funds to support your garden. This could be other grants that you're applying for. It could be fundraisers. If you are sharing about other grants that you've applied for and you're just not sure of the outcome yet, you can include that and just let us know. It's to be determined. The way that this tool works is just a simple plus button to enter a line item, and you'll give us some details, and then you'll give us the amount. So, we're not looking for a breakdown of like exactly how many types of seeds, 10 carrot seeds, 10 radish seeds. It's just more general, right? Like how much of the money are you anticipating spending on one particular item for your garden? And similarly for the revenue, it doesn't have to be more specific than what you anticipate the source will be. Okay. So we've got about 10 to 11 minutes for questions. Pete has been monitoring. I know there's a ton of questions coming through, so he's going to help by bubbling up some of the most commonly asked questions. I'll share as much clarification as I can, and then rest assured, if you don't get your questions answered or you have a question about your specific situation, just email us at grants@wholekidsfoundation.org. And then as a reminder, the next webinar that we're going to be holding at 2 p.m. Central on Monday, March 7th is going to be specifically for Q&A. So the majority of the time will be spent with Pete and I looking at what questions are coming through and answering in real time. So lots of opportunities to get you the answers and information that you need, but we'll use the last little bit of time we have today to do some of that. So Pete, I would love to hear what people have been submitting, so we can share some
Okay,
clarification.
great. Can you hear me, Stephanie?
I can, yeah.
Okay, so question for you, Stephanie. If a school organization has applied in the past and been placed on hold, should that school organization reapply?
Yes, absolutely. We highly encourage schools that have been placed on hold to reapply. You will have to open a new application, and you can use some of the same content from your previous application. You could carry it over, you know, and update and edit as you see fit, or based on any changes that have taken place over the last year or two, or however many it's been since you previously applied. We look at that. We look at previously placed on hold when we're selecting our recipients.
Mm-hmm. Okay, next question that has been asked a lot is, can funds from the grant be used to pay someone, either salary, stipend, or can it be used for salary or stipend or wages?
Yes, it can. The people power behind your garden. We get that question a lot. So the funds can be used to support, you know, somebody supporting your garden.
Great. Next question that's coming up a lot is, what do 501c3 or nonprofit organizations need to prove their nonprofit status in order to apply for the grant?
In theory, it should just be your EIN, because what they're going to ask you to do when you register is search the IRS database for your EIN. And if you can find yourself in there, then that is verification that you are a 501c3 in good standing. There are always exceptions to the rule. So if you're having trouble finding yourself, reach out to us. Sometimes what ends up happening is we'll just ask you for the documentation related to your 501c3 status. So, you know, if we troubleshoot with you and we can't find what we need, we might just ask that you send us your IRS tax exempt letter. So it'll be the federal documentation, not the state documentation.
Great. And similarly for a school, what if it's a new school that, I mean, we need, you know, that maybe isn't in an NCES database?
Yeah, I just had one of these yesterday. Just email us and let us know, you know, what we found. For example, in that particular situation is it's very clear. We can tell that the school is part of the district. They had their first day on August 1st of 2021 or whatever. So we recognize that there are exceptions and different scenarios. So just contact us and we'll get you set up with what you need. Get in the system.
The next, a lot of questions are coming about location of garden and in which organization should apply for this grant. And I'll just answer this one as best I can. We're looking to support and fund gardens that are either located at a school or located on the grounds of a nonprofit organization. And if you, so when to decide whether you should apply as a nonprofit organization or as a school, first ask yourself the question, where's the garden located? Is it located at the nonprofit on the grounds of the nonprofit, or is it located at the school? And if it's located at the school, you should probably apply as a school with that school's information. If it's located on the grounds of a nonprofit organization, you should probably apply as an organization with the organization's information. So we are definitely getting a lot of questions about community partner, and we've talked a little bit about it. And you know, questions will continue to come. Again, for community partner, if you feel you have lots of community partners, but not one specific designated, you know, use that as a group. So like I was just asked the question, you know, can a group of parent volunteers be a community partner? You know, put that in your community partner section as a group of dedicated parent volunteers that are supporting your garden and how they're supporting your garden. But we are definitely looking for another group, another entity, another organization that is in supporting your garden program as a community partner. Let's see. Other questions that are popping up are, oh, another question that keeps popping up, Stephanie, is what if I'm a nonprofit supporting multiple schools and I had one of those grants funded last year? Am I eligible to apply for another school, a different school?
Yeah, so this is to Pete's point of the last question of asking yourself where the garden lives, and if you are a nonprofit working with a school, but the school is where the garden lives, applying as the school is what enables you as a nonprofit working with multiple schools to apply, you know, multiple times in a row if you're working with different schools. So if you are, say you work with 5 schools, and you got a grant for one last year, then this year you want to apply for another school that you work with, you can do that.
Yes, and the same if you are a school district and you are looking to apply for multiple schools. You can't just apply as a district for multiple schools. You apply for each school. So the grant is tied to an individual garden education program, not a district-wide. Unless you're a very small school district, you're maybe all in one building, and you're applying for, you know, a high school, middle school, and elementary school, all one district, all one building, and it's one garden education program.
So lots of scenarios, and we're, you know, big part of what we're doing is trying to help y'all discern the best way to register. You know, something that this is bringing up that I didn't previously share is that we do ask that the funds of the grant be used on one location. So you can't apply for this grant and then split the $3,000 among multiple schools. So if you're a nonprofit and you work with 5 schools, you could submit 5 applications in one cycle, assuming they're all in the names of the individual schools, because the funds are going to support that school's garden program, rather than you applying as the nonprofit and hoping to split the funds among the 5 schools.
Another
We've
question, yeah, it's just about where do we get the webinar?
Minutes, so
where do we get this webinar, Stephanie? When and where?
So the recording, it's going to be available on our website. It'll be embedded onto the Whole Kids Foundation Garden Grant page. I've noticed it in the chat in a couple of places. People are asking about the slides. So you can obviously see the slides and access them in the video part of it. And if you're interested in the slides themselves, if that would be helpful to you, you can email us and ask. I'd be happy to share them with you. And then we will send this recording in an email to anyone who signed up for the webinar. I'm seeing something a couple of times in the chat that I'd love to share. Is hydroponics, is that eligible and an appropriate use of the grant funds? And yes. So to something I said earlier in the PowerPoint of we support many types of gardens, any types of gardens, so long as you're growing food. That includes indoor gardening, things like hydroponics, aquaponics, and that type. So that's absolutely something we see a lot, and definitely you're eligible for our garden grant. All right, one last question before we.
Yes, just to clarify, no, this is not a grant program for Head Start, pre-K, early childcare. So we are funding educational garden programs for kids and students in the K through 12 range only.
Okay. Thank you guys for joining. I'm so sorry about the internet snafu. It's just unavoidable these days. So I appreciate your patience and your flexibility and in bearing with Pete while I got back up and running. Again, we're having another webinar, strictly Q&A, so bring your questions on March 7th. Otherwise, check out our website and email if you need additional support or have additional questions. Thank you all so much. Have a good one.
Thank you.